Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, delegates. We will start in 1 minute. If you want to take your seats. Good afternoon, everyone. Then let's resume our session. I hope you had a good lunch and you were able to attend some of the side events that are happening during that time. I'd like to hand over to Secretariat for some announcements before we reconvene into our business. So, Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Two announcements. CRP 13.3 on resource mobilization is published online on the Secretariat website. Another announcement, please, we would like to ask delegates not to change the location of the nameplates. Please do not remove your nameplates. The technical team, they've worked hard to figure out what the problem was. We think it's fixed, but we ask for your collaboration with the seating arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. We have a lot to get through this afternoon, so I would encourage us all to focus and to be brief in our interventions. Some of the work, at least, will go into working groups where there'll be much longer to deliberate, but obviously when you have something to say, it's important that you say it here as well. Before lunch, we were concluding our business on 18.1, Synergies and Partnerships, and I was requesting that any further interventions were made. So could I request that again now on 18.1, Synergies and Partnerships? Were there any further comments? I think we had just about exhausted the list of interventions, and there will be a CRP coming back for further discussion. Is there a flag? If there's a flag at the back, could you try and press your desk? Maybe it's not. No. Okay. Oh, we've got one here. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Dualos welcomes the reports by the CMS Secretariat on the synergies and partnerships, including on its engagement in the UN oceans, the interagency mechanism that seeks to enhance, strengthen, and promote coordination, coherence, and effectiveness of the activities of the UN system and the International Civil Authority on ocean and coastal issues. It currently has 30 members consisting of UN system organizations with competence in activities related to ocean and coastal areas and the International Civil Authority. Bearing in mind the synergies between the CMS and the newly adopted agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sensible use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ agreement, which has been mentioned by several delegations this morning, I wish to note that on 16 January 2024, principals of organizations participating in UN Oceans endorsed a statement of commitments to strengthen and promote coordination and coherence of the UN system activities in relation to the BBNJ agreement. Among other things, this includes promoting a better understanding of the agreement and preparation for its entry into force, regular sharing of information on activities related to the agreement with a view to identifying possible areas for collaboration and synergy, exchanging experiences, best practices, tools, and methodologies, and considering organizing joint activities aimed at supporting states and regional economic integration organizations in relation to the agreement and its complementarity with relevant legal instruments, frameworks, and bodies. In discharging its function as the focal point of UN Oceans, Dualos looks forward to stepping up its collaboration with the CMS Secretariat and other members of the UN Oceans, including on issues relating to marine migratory species. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that helpful intervention. I don't think I see any others, so we'll close the item for now. There will be a CRP coming back. Thank you very much for your thoughts and to the Secretariat for your work in this area. Can I move on then to item 18.2, which is cooperation with the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, excuse me, IPBES as we know it. It's document 18.2, Rev 1, and it asks the Secretariat to introduce this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. Under the agenda item 18.2, the Secretariat wishes to introduce the document UNEP CMS COP14, document 18.2 Ref 1, cooperation with the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. It contains two annexes. Annex 1 contains proposed amendments to Resolution 10.8 as revised at COP13 on cooperation between the IPBES and CMS. Annex 2 then contains draft decisions on cooperation between IPBES and CMS. The document also has an addendum where Scientific Council's comments and recommendations to the COP are provided. It's document UNEP CMS COP14, document 18.2, addendum 1. In summary, the document reports on progress on the implementation of Resolution 10.8 and decisions 13.12 and 13.13 with regard to the cooperation with IPBES. The document also proposes amendments to Resolution 10.8, the deletion of decisions 13.11 to 13.13, and the adoption of new decisions. Revision 1 of the document provides an update of the outcomes of the IPBES plenary that took place between 28th of August and 2nd September 2023, and that adopted decision IPBES 10/1 on the implementation of the rolling work program of IPBES up to 2030. In its part 2, called Assessing Knowledge, the work program contains the undertaking of a fast-track methodological assessment on integrated biodiversity, inclusive spatial planning, and ecological connectivity. Improving connectivity is key for achieving objectives of the CMS, as well as CBD and other multilateral environmental conventions. And therefore, as the Secretariat, we very much welcome the decision to carry out this assessment. The proposed amendments to the Resolution 10.8 revised at COP13 bring the resolution in line with the latest developments and invite IPBES to include issues relevant to migratory species, including ecological connectivity, in future assessments and technical papers. Draft decisions pave the way for future cooperation with IPBES, in particular request the Scientific Council to engage in relevant scoping processes of the IPBES assessments which are relevant for CMS. Therefore, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to firstly provide guidance to the Secretariat with respect to further engagement with IPBES, then adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 10.8 Ref COP13 contained in Annex 1 of the document, thirdly adopt the draft decisions as contained in Annex 2 of this document, and finally delete decisions 13.11 to 13.13. Mr. Chair, before opening the floor for discussion, I suggest that you give the floor to the representative of IPBES to share their observations on this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretariat. If I could do that, if I could ask if IPBES would like to make any comments.
IPBES,
yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Yes, now it works. Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. The objective of IPBES is to strengthen the science policy interface for biodiversity and ecosystem services for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being, and sustainable development. IPBES does so mainly by publishing assessments of knowledge on topics related to biodiversity. The assessments are intended to benefit the work of multilateral environmental agreements, such as CMS. Importantly, however, MEAs can also play important roles during the different stages of the IPBES assessment process. IPBES is therefore delighted that CMS has in the past considered the IPBES Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, submitted a request for a new assessment on connectivity, and encouraged its constituency to nominate experts and to review drafts of IPBES assessments. We are also grateful to the chair of the CMS Scientific Council, Ms. Narelle Montgomery, for participating in the meetings of the IPBES Multidisciplinary Expert Panel as an observer, and to our colleagues at the CMS Secretariat for the fruitful exchanges under the Memorandum of Understanding between our two secretariats. Regarding future work, the IPBES 10 Plenary in September 2023 decided to conduct a fast-track methodological assessment of integrated biodiversity-inclusive spatial planning and ecological connectivity between 2025 and 2027. The scoping report for the assessment, including a description of the assessment chapters, is set out in Annex 2 to Decision IPBES 10.1. The plenary also decided to conduct a second global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services between 2025 and 2028. IPBES 11 is planned to be held this December 2024 in Namibia. The plenary will consider two assessments which are very important for the international biodiversity agenda and also highly relevant to work in other sectors. The nexus assessment of the interlinkages among biodiversity, food, water, and health, and the transformative change assessment on the underlying causes of biodiversity loss and the determinants of transformative change and options for achieving the 2050 vision for biodiversity. We hope that these assessments will inform achievement of the objectives of the Convention on Migratory Species and wish you a successful COP here in Samarkand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, IPBES, for that and for your supportive comments in terms of the work of CMS and IPBES working together. Can I open the floor then for any comments? Yes, United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair. The UK welcomes this document outlining the process on the implementation of Resolution 10.8, Rev COP14, and Decisions 13.12 and 13.13. We note the proposed changes to the resolution and decisions, and that the Rev 1 doc also provides an update on the outcome of the IPBES 10 plenary that took place in August last year. We would like to make some changes with the aim to strengthen the proposed resolution and decisions to establish a process for the CMS to take evidence-based action in response to the IPBES reports. We would also like the Scientific Council and Secretariat to proactively engage with the upcoming IPBES work programme, particularly the assessment on the spatial planning and ecological connectivity and the second global assessment, to ensure it provides evidence to support CMS. We will provide you these amendments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you. United Kingdom? I don't see any other parties or observers asking for, oh yes, there is one. Egypt, please. No?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. IPBES, or IPBES as it's known, has made significant contribution to our understanding of the biodiversity conservation issues as stated already by the representative of IPBES. Having said that, when you look at all the studies or the assessment that made over the last 10 years, we are talking about considerable number of all related issues, especially biodiversity conservation, and most of these are related to actually CMS, especially as the representative of UK mentioned the special planning and ecological connectivity. Based on all of this, Egypt supports the decision already proposed by IPBES in a way that both CMS and IPBES can work together in the future and continue the good work that have been already done over the last few years. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Egypt? I don't see anyone else calling for the floor. Oh, sorry, I do. New Zealand, thank you. The electronic system should be working again, by the way, so if you try that as well. If not, then wave your flag. But New Zealand?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we would like to thank the Secretariat and the Chair of the Scientific Council for their constructive engagement with IPBES during the intersessional period. And we welcome the work of IPBES on their assessment of ecological connectivity and other work that CMS is contributing to. This work is very important to our input into our CMS decisions, so we support future engagement, and we do support the draft resolutions and decisions. We did have a comment from one of our staff who's involved with IPBES coordination, and they said that a key point that seemed to be missing in the document, and it was raised by the UK earlier, is that we need to be able to implement the decisions that are coming through from IPBES into the CMS system. There's no point in them producing lots and lots of reports if we are not able to capture those really useful inputs and get them coordinated through various agreements and handed on to parties to implement. So, yeah, that's something that we support the UK on. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. I don't see any other interventions being called for. What I'd like to do then is we'll ask you to submit any written comments on this as soon as possible, and we'll produce a CRP to bring back to the Committee of the Whole. Thank you very much. Could we then move on to item 19, which is Communications, Outreach and Information Management, and it's document 19, Inf 19, and again, Secretariat will introduce this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. Under the agenda item 19, the Secretariat wishes to introduce the document number UNEP CMS COP14 Doc 19, Communication and Information Management. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. It contains one annex which contains two draft decisions, one being directed to the Secretariat and the other being directed to the parties. There is also a related information document, UNEP CMS COP14 Inf 19, which contains the Strategic Communication Assessment. The document reports on a summary of communication, outreach and information management activities carried out by the Secretariat since the 13th meeting of the Conference of the Parties in 2020. The document highlights activities that were aimed at raising awareness of migratory species and the multiple threats they face, as well as boosting the profile of the Convention through various forums such as new partnerships, international and national media coverage, campaigns, and social media engagement. Furthermore, it provides a summary of the activities related to information and knowledge management in the past intersessional period. Additionally, the Secretariat initiated a strategic review of its communication and outreach activities. This review focuses on identifying challenges of strategic importance and proposing a way forward. The assessment is available on information document INF 19. Therefore, in terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to take note of this document and make any comments as appropriate. B, adopt the decision contained in Annex 1 to this document. C, take note of the strategic communications assessment presented as information doc 19. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Communications and outreach is a key part of the work of the Convention. We've seen that through many examples in recent weeks. Can I open the floor for comments, please? If there are no parties wanting to take the floor, just having a look around. Yes, Egypt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, the issue of communication and management are of crucial importance to the implementation of the CMS Convention. However, it is not only activity that we are interested to explore, because these already have been done. We need to look at the new emerging issues that took place over the last couple of years, especially since COP14. I'm referring to the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework that took place almost more than a year ago, and there is a very good communication strategy as well. So what we are referring to now, all of our work in each convention, whether CMS or CBD or whatever, we need to put all of these things together, otherwise we'll be wasting our time. When we talk about synergies among different conventions, we need to look at the way how can we communicate much better. The most important thing that we need to look at is what we call communication language. Communication language is not the English or French or whatever, it's how to communicate with other people. We keep talking to each other, but this is not needed. We need to communicate with other people in a way that they understand the issue of conservation in a way that, for example, in any cabinet in the world, they discuss something like 10 issues. It's investment, for example. We need investment about conservation of CMS issues, gender issue as well, education, health. This is the way how can you communicate with other decision makers to understand all of this. So we support the proposal, the decisions in general, but we need to make a reference to what already have been done in CBS and MS and other conventions as well, in a way that we speak one communication language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. I've got the Born Free Foundation next.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo what the distinguished delegate from Egypt just said. It's such an important topic but as this is an INF doc, I wondered if I could give you a quick INF intervention, which is that there is a new non-profit TV channel and streaming platform called Ecoflix, which is designed exactly to do what this document is seeking to do, to put accurate information into it's free to schools and universities worldwide, and it's a tool. So everyone in the room who's interested in reaching out is invited to use that tool. Born Free is already a partner. Please consider becoming a partner, and I hope the CMS will soon have a page on Ecoflix for its videos and information. Thank you.
Thank you, Born Free Foundation. I don't see any other requests for the floor. This paper, if there are no textual additions, then I think we could agree the paper now so that we don't need to keep coming back to it later on our agenda. So what I'd like to do is check that you're happy that we recommend this paper for adoption in the plenary session. I don't see any, again, requests for the floor. Can we take that as a recommended for adoption then by the plenary? I'm told to bang this briefly. That's one done. Thank you very much. Yeah, deserves a round of applause. There are quite a few to go. Thank you for that. Thank you, Secretariat, as well, for your work on communications over the last triennium. Can we move then on to item 20, which is the Atlas of Animal Migration? And this will be introduced by Fernando Spina, our appointed councillor, and by Umberto Gavarroso from the Raptors MOU. It's document 20, addendum 1. So could I ask Fernando Spina to introduce, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 20, the Secretariat wishes to introduce document CMS COP14 Doc 20, Atlas on Animal Migration. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat. This document has one annex, which contains a draft decision. The document also has an addendum where Scientific Council's comments and recommendations to the COP are provided. In summary, the document reports on the positive developments towards an Atlas of Animal Migration, which was included in the CMS Programme of Work for 2015-2017 at COP11, and is foreseen as a long-term initiative expected to be implemented through a modular approach. A mandate for continued work on an atlas was included in the CMS programs of work for the intersessional periods between COP12 and COP13 and between COP13 and COP14. The document highlights progress in the development of 4 modules of the Atlas. One is the Atlas for migratory mammals in the Central Asian region. Thanks to support by International Climate Initiative of the German government, later this year this atlas will update the Central Asian Mammals Migration Linear Infrastructure Atlas, originally funded by the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety of Germany and the Swiss government, and under the lead of the Wildlife Conservation Society. A second one is the Atlas of Bird Migration in the Eurasian African region, funded by the former Ministry of the Environment and Protection of Land and Sea of the Government of Italy, and undertaken by the European Union for Bird Ringing, EURING, in collaboration with the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior under an agreement with the CMS Secretariat. This interactive atlas has been completed and launched in May 2022 and is publicly accessible, featuring 300 species and 4 specific research modules on historical changes in migration patterns, intentional killing of birds by man, migration seasons of hunted species, and migratory connectivity within the European-African migration system, respectively. The third module is the Marine Turtle Breeding and Migration Atlas TurtleNet, an online interactive atlas developed by Queensland's Departments of Environment and Science in collaboration with CMS and launched in June 2021 with Australian and global data on nesting, courtship, feeding and migration routes of marine turtles. Funding aimed at further developing the atlas has been secured from the Government of Australia. A fourth one is the Global Initiative on Ungulate Migration, GIUM, where the CMS Secretariat is working in partnership with an international team of scientists and conservationists to create a first-ever global atlas of ungulate migrations. This amazing initiative has been launched in May 2021 with a commentary published in the journal Science, and the GIUM Science Advisory Board had an inaugural meeting in Wyoming in July 2023. In terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to take note of this report and adopt the decisions contained in Annex 1 to this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to all the funding and collaborating bodies involved in this. It's a really excellent initiative. Can I open the floor for any comments on the paper? Got Egypt and then European Union. Egypt, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This issue, I mean the Atlas of Animal Migration, is very, very crucial to CMS as well as other biodiversity-related conventions. Therefore, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the excellent work that have been done over the last few years. Not only the Secretariat, but the Scientific Council and all of the partners with their funding or the assessment that have been done. And in spite of all of this, the issue of animal migration is a very, very serious matter. All what we have done is almost nothing. Issues of turtles, for example, they're still being killed everywhere. Birds as well. Many, many partners are still working, but what we have done, we need to change the way how we work. We need to change the way how our mind set. We are talking about innovation in thinking. How can we take a decision based on scientific as well as other issues related to animal migration? In Egypt here, we have many, many partners that are working with us, like BirdLife International, for example. And we have done the best we can where we assist the issue of bird migration. But we couldn't resolve all of the issues simply because there are other issues that need to be connected to each other. I'm referring to the socio-economics of animal migrations. People still think these are gifts of God. Why want us to stop them? So we need to address all of this. At the same time, we have to find out the alternatives for the existing situation now. Egypt is not very happy at all about the way how birds are being killed illegally everywhere. Egypt is a place known not only for bird migration, but for turtles and many, many, many marine species as well. We need support in a way that we can work together in an innovative way, that what have been done in the past cannot be accepted anymore. And we have been trying to do this. And that's why in my area intervention, I stress the issue of communication languages. What we have done in communication is not only to talk to people, but to change their attitude in a way that we can agree on what is needed to be done. Take the issue of ecological connectivity. CMS already done a fantastic job to convince IPBES, for example, to make the assessment, but the issue of connectivity is still a serious matter, is still a very serious matter. So we support the decision proposed to us, but we need to take into consideration all of the issues that we already mentioned by Egypt. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt, for that intervention. I'll take a few more, then I'll summarize where we are with this issue. Could we go to the European Union, then Bahrain? So European Union, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The European Union and its member states congratulate the Scientific Council, the parties and the stakeholders involved in the development of the Atlas on animal migration. During this period, 3 of the 4 modules of the Atlas have been launched. Central Asian mammals, African Eurasian birds, and marine turtles now have reference literature improving the understanding of their migration behavior and supporting management programs that improve their conservation status globally. We encourage parties to support the continuation of this work, both for new groups of migratory species and in new regions. The EU and its member states would, however, stress the importance to avoid unnecessary increase of reporting burden, while it is also important that experiences of parties are heard and taken into consideration. Therefore, a lighter process for gathering feedbacks should be considered, for example, through notification. We also feel that the Scientific Council could be asked to provide further advice and guidance to the Secretariat on updating existing and developing additional modules of the Atlas, as well as on improving the usability of the Atlas if required. The EU and its member states recognize the collective efforts made by the CMS family on this topic, and we support the proposed decisions, with some amendments which we have already submitted to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Can we move then to Bahrain? Bahrain, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Bahrain would like to acknowledge the impressive work that went into the Atlas of Animal Migration. We recognize the growing importance of mapping animals' migration and fully support the call for parties to utilize this valuable resource and report on their experiences. This will greatly contribute to enhancing and improving the understanding of migration patterns. While we do not have an amendment to propose, we would like to highlight our interest in seeing progress in line with the draft decision 14.BB, specifically Title D in Annex 1 of Document 20. This decision aims to explore possibilities for developing additional models. And we hope to see the initiation of an atlas for the Central Asian flyway in the future. We acknowledge that achieving this goal will require increased scientific and technical expertise in the region, which will be addressed in the relevant agenda item during this week. This is a suggestion for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahrain, for that. I see India, please.
Thank you, Chair. India acknowledges that the need for mapping animal migration has become all the more relevant. Identifying important sites for migratory species and understanding migration patterns will directly contribute to achievement of the objectives of the Convention, as well as to other global policy priorities, including the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We welcome the draft decisions contained in the CMS COP14 Doc 20 Annex 1 and would like to echo the valuable suggestions made by EU on additional models and the suggestion made by Bahrain, especially on the need for developing an atlas for the migratory birds along the Central Asian flyway. This atlas would help in further developing the conservation interventions for the migratory species within the CAF region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, India. I think we have received some written comments, so there will be a CRP on this issue that will come back to the committee for your further deliberation. If there are no other interventions, can I add my thanks to the team involved in this work. It's a really world-leading, pivotal piece of work that's been done. So congratulate the appointed councillor and all those associated with this initiative, so thank you. There is a CRP that will come back. In terms of the agenda, we have reached where we would have been by our lunch break. I'm very glad we got to lunchtime before 4 o'clock. Let's carry on. The next section on our agenda is the interpretation and implementation of the Convention, really looking at cross-cutting issues in particular. And cross-cutting issues, as you've seen, are what I think of as a real growth area for the Convention. As we'll see in the following papers, there are some very important issues in here. What I'd like to do then is move to item 30, 30.1, which is on intentional take, and 30.11, which is priorities for addressing illegal and unsustainable taking of migratory species. This is document 30.11, Rev 1, document 30.11, addendum 1, and INF 30.1.1. And if I could ask the Secretariat to introduce. Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, under agenda item 30.1.1, the Secretariat wishes to introduce document 30.1.1 Rev 1 on priorities for addressing illegal and unsustainable taking of migratory species. The document includes a proposal to mobilize efforts to address these issues, and with an amendment to Resolution 11.31 on fighting wildlife crime and decisions to address these issues. Rev.1 made consistent the language in decisions directed to the Scientific Council. The document was prepared by the Secretariat and, like many documents, was also considered by the Scientific Council, the Sessional Committee, at its last meeting. This document contains 2 annexes. Annex 1 contains an updated version of Resolution 11.31, which aims to more holistically address both illegal and unsustainable taking. Annex 2 contains proposed draft decisions aimed at parties, the Scientific Council, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, and the Secretariat. The background of this document is that it examines growing trends in illegal or unsustainable taking, use, or sale of wild animals, migratory species for domestic purposes, which we've found in the report launched yesterday is a major threat to many migratory species as well as other wild animals. It defines what constitutes illegal taking and sustainability, and examines the need for a more holistic approach to address current gaps in legislation, policies, and programs to increase engagement with local communities, indigenous peoples, and to increase awareness of species that are listed under CMS Appendix 1 that are prohibited from being taken with some exception. The document also highlights that the illegal and unsustainable taking of migratory species needs to be addressed in a more cross-cutting, comprehensive way in the work of CMS, taking into account the continued need for measures specifically targeting different taxa or groups of species, including through existing initiatives under CMS. The CMS study on terrestrial wild meat, the IPBES report on sustainable use, and the draft State of the World's Migratory Species report all contain recommendations that highlight a need for more focus on all of these issues. And in brief, the document also makes clear that all such work by CMS should be done in collaboration with other entities who are also engaged in these issues. The recommended actions are: the Conference of the Parties is recommended to A, adopt the resolution contained in Annex 1 of this document, and B, adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. Could I open the floor for any comments, please? Got Nigeria, please.
Thank you, Chair. Since this is our first intervention, we would like to congratulate the government of Uzbekistan and the CMS Secretariat for a wonderful conference so far. We would like to propose amendments to the resolution on 3 issues. Firstly, we suggest to reward the penultimate preamble paragraph to clarify that sustainable use should not be promoted as such, but rather, where wildlife is used, it is necessary to ensure sustainability, and to clarify that the utilization of wildlife may, under some circumstances, contribute to conservation, but should not be considered as an integral part of conservation as a default. Secondly, we recommend including wording in the preambular and operative parts to reflect ongoing work under various CMS instruments to ensure that use is sustainable through scientifically robust and stakeholder-inclusive adaptive management, as well as request to the Scientific Council in Decision 14.dd to develop general guidance on adaptive harvest management on the basis of existing best practice in the CMS family. And finally, in operational paragraph 17, the specific task forces which have been created to address illegal killing and not sustainable use, such as the various avian task forces to address illegal killing, hunting, taking, and trade, should also be referenced as processes for relevant stakeholders to engage in. We will send a more precise text to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. Could we hear from Kazakhstan, please?
Thank you, Chair. Kazakhstan supports Resolution 11.41 and its comprehensive approach to address illegal and unsustainable taking of wildlife. However, Kazakhstan would like to note that the current wording in para 12 of the resolution creates a risk of trade in confiscated illegally obtained wildlife specimens. The text specifies a prohibition of the possession and sale of illegally obtained wildlife specimens and the products other than those that have been confiscated. At the same time, CITES acknowledge that the selling of confiscated animal is controversial and accompanying the logistical and political problems. This is CITES Resolution Conference 17.8. Kazakhstan suggests COP to align the CMS resolutions with the CITES approach and articulate in the text of the resolution that confiscated wildlife specimens should be disposed of in the best possible manner that does not stimulate further illegal trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazakhstan. Could we have the United Kingdom, please?
Thank you, Chair. The UK welcomes this document and thanks the Secretariat for its work in producing it. As the document sets out, the issue of illegal and unsustainable take has been considered under the Convention for many years. However, we agree that there is value in adopting a more coordinated and collaborative approach as set out in the paper. We strongly support greater collaboration with the other MEAs such as CITES and potential partners such as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. The IPBES report on sustainable use, alongside the State of the World's Migratory Species report, make for collective stark reading. If parties are to achieve the targets 4, 5 and 9 under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, for example, then international cooperation is needed for migratory species to ensure that they are fully protected along the entire length of their migratory paths. And as parties to this convention, we are all obliged to ensure that our domestic legislation prevents the taking of Appendix 1 listed species, apart from in some exceptional circumstances. The UK is committed to leading efforts to tackle illegal wildlife trade and address overexploitation of species, including strengthening international cooperation. In the UK, the priorities for our National Wildlife Crime Unit include targeted efforts to protect and prevent the illegal take of many migratory species, such as the European eel and several species of birds of prey, where robust domestic controls and protections for these species are crucial in ensuring there aren't many gaps domestically that would hinder the UK meeting the obligations we commit to under international mechanisms such as CMS, CITES and CBD, amongst others. The UK wishes to suggest a few amendments to strengthen the Resolution 11.31 further along with relevant decisions. Firstly, we would like to see paragraph 1 of the resolutions widened to include increasing awareness amongst relevant enforcement and judicial bodies as well as the private sector and the public. Additionally, we would like to see training on the issue of illegal, unsustainable take of migratory species embedded into the national curricula of relevant training academies and schools, and propose text changes to paragraph 3 of the resolution as well as decision 14AA directed to parties. Finally, we wish to ensure the risk of trade in confiscated wildlife specimens is minimalised, and we have suggestions to amend the text in paragraph 12 of the resolution. We will provide these amendments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you. United Kingdom, if you could supply these as soon as possible, that would be helpful. European Union, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The EU and its member states thank the Secretariat for the document and the proposed amendments. We acknowledge the complex challenges analyzed in the document and support the revised Resolution 11.31 and the proposed decision with minor amendments. As the agreement on BBNG is equally important for marine migratory species as the Kunming-Montreal GBF, the resolution and the draft decision should be amended accordingly. In addition, the amended draft resolution should focus on migratory species as within the scope of the CMS. For marine migratory species, the EU and its member states would like to recall that at the international level, the fight against illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing is a priority of fisheries and fisheries-related bodies and is subject of legally binding treaties, such as the Port State Measures Agreement, and is an important part of the mandate of regional fisheries management organizations. We also suggest mentioning migration ranges rather than flyways so as to include marine species when appropriate. We have submitted our amendments to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Israel next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to save time, we'll just echo the comments of those parties that we agree with. So we certainly echo the comments by Nigeria and thank them for their comments that it should be emphasized that trade, wherever it occurs, should be sustainable, and that is better wording. We also echo the comments by Kazakhstan and the UK on the issue of confiscated wildlife and how it's related in CITES. So in paragraph 12 of the resolution, where it says, suggest the enacting of a national laws that prohibit the possession and sale of illegally obtained wildlife specimens and products, we would suggest ending the sentence at that point and deleting the end of the sentence, which says other than those that have been confiscated. We have one short sentence that we would like to add to the preamble, please, and I'll read it, and we also sent it to the Secretariat. Added to the preamble, recognizing that the illegal taking and trade of wildlife can increase the risk of zoonoses and pathogen spillover from wildlife to humans, period. As I said, we sent that already into the Secretariat, and we would like to see that added to the preamble. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel, for these comments. Could I move on then to Egypt, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the excellent work that have been done. Egypt supports interventions already made by Nigeria on behalf, perhaps, in Africa, because all of the amendments that already proposed, we agree with them as well. EU made a very good intervention, so we support them as well, and EU, in a way that all issues related to the migratory species need to be reconsidered within the new emerging issues that or issues that already took place over the last few years. Mr. Shah, the issue of illegal trade is not the issue of sustainability. It is the changes over the time. We deal with that issue for many, many years, but we forgot that there are many changes that took place recently. For example, the case in Egypt, we used to have local communities catch their own migratory species in a sustainable way, because this is the way how they are used to do for many, many years. But because of the use of technologies, for example, and social media, whatever, it turned out that there are many other countries that they are not aware of all of this, became very interested in getting all of these species. So this confiscated animals, whether birds or fish or whatever, need to be reconsidered again and again and again, because we are facing actually serious matters now, and we cannot look at it only in terms of illegality or whatever. It is not the issue of awareness, Mr. Shah, or other issues. The issue is of law enforcement. Law enforcement need a lot of resources, not only in terms of the human resources or technical resources or whatever, but at the same time to look at it in a collaborative way. We keep talking about synergies and mainstreaming among all of the multilateral environmental agreement. We have liaison group, but the work already being done, especially in recent weeks where we had a meeting in Bern in Switzerland, and the issue of synergies will not be, we're not capable of preparing something strong in a way that we can match what already approved by the Global Biodiversity Framework. Please take into all of these amendments by previous interventions, and we support them as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Egypt. And we have quite a long list of interventions requested. I would ask that you really focus down your interventions now. I'm looking at timing through to the end of today. We do need to go through the papers to then allow time in working groups this evening and beyond. So if you could really focus your interventions, that would be helpful. Could I take the Cheetah Conservation Fund, please?
Thank you, Chair. Since this is the first time we've spoken, just to add our thanks to our hosts for their warm and impressive hospitality. And also thanks to the Secretariat for preparing this paper. However, I noticed that there is no reference in it to the African Carnivores Initiative or to the impact of illegal take on predators in general. This seems to be an omission, given that illegal take resulting from human-wildlife conflict or illegal trade is one of the chief threats to cheetahs and other listed species of predators. There are elements of the ACI program of work that should certainly be amenable to cross-cutting strategies and activities. I'm happy to propose some language or work with others to create some new language. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be helpful if you could send any words into the Secretariat. I've got the Wildlife Conservation Society.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the technicians for correcting the fact that we're no longer Ireland. WCS appreciates this document. We won't go into great detail and support adoption of the amendments. We greatly appreciate the many interventions from parties, including the UK, European Union, Israel, Nigeria, and others. We encourage parties to include in the amended resolution reference to engagement also with the UN Convention against transnational organized crime and the UN Convention against corruption, since illegal take of migratory animal species and associated crime and corruption are also relevant to CMS implementation and CMS species, and we suggest that be directed both to parties and the Secretariat. We note significant attention by governments to illegal international trade, but many migratory animal species are not on the CITES appendices, and many are subject to highly detrimental, illegal, and unsustainable domestic use. All international trade starts with domestic take and use, and this issue should be seen as a priority. We therefore encourage text that encourages increased attention by CMS, parties, and Secretariat to the prevention of any illegal and unsustainable use and take of CMS-listed species, in line with what was suggested, I believe, by Nigeria and Israel. Draft Decision 14.8AA calls on parties to identify drivers, adopt legislation. We encourage consideration by the working group of stronger text, including possibly text that calls on parties to take all necessary actions to prevent the illegal and unsustainable use and take of CMS-listed species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wildlife Conservation Society, for that. We've got Kyrgyzstan, please.
Здравствуйте, уважаемый председатель. Good day, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. Let me thank the Republic of Uzbekistan and the CMS Secretary for the invitation and the warm welcoming in the historical city Samarkand. For us, it's a huge honor that the initiated historical resolution, which was initiated by the Kyrgyz Republic, become the name and the topic of the COP14. Nature knows no borders. We know that the taken animals must be utilized and used in the best way for the prevention of the illegal trafficking of the animals. So we recommend to add the resolution with some of the wordings that we are providing in the written format, and the type of the resending of the taken animals to the countries of the export. With regard to the resolution 11.31, the prevention of the illegal trafficking, we also provide some recommendations. In addition, the Kyrgyzstan is recommended to add the additional text on cooperation with the local societies, so the local law enforcement and the court systems and other stakeholders that have the data on the cases of the illegal taking of the animals, and for the provision of the necessary measures for the prevention of these kind of cases in the future. And the Kyrgyzstan, with regard to the 4.14 AA, in accordance with the clause 4 of the resolution, recommends to strengthen the national forces on ensuring the sustainability of the legal taking of the animals and the trafficking. In particular, the further monitoring over them and the conduction of the legal researches and identification of the fact cases for the better monitoring and the management of the migrating animals. Kyrgyzstan also recommends to reflect in the text of the resolution of the necessity of the establishment of the regular monitoring of these kind of cases. Thank you very much for your attention.
Very much, Kyrgyzstan, for that. I'm just looking at the list. I'm tempted to close the list. I've got interventions from Australia, Kenya, Fauna and Flora and Born Free Foundation, and I think I'll close after that. We've got some very important comments made already, but let's move through this. So Australia, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually just asking for a point of clarification, mainly, I think, with my hat on as Chair of the Scientific Council. I know that the Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council did a lot of work at its July meeting, reviewing a lot of these documents and providing comments, which the Secretariat then did a lot of work also putting online as an addendum badge to Scientific Council comments. And I'm just wondering, like, I understand that some working groups are sort of recognising and taking these comments into account when they're reviewing the document and asking if parties are supporting it. But just wondering for those documents that aren't going to a working group, how that will be done on the floor here and if that is being applied consistently across working groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Australia. I think the important point in the committee is that parties have the opportunity to add their comments into that overall deliberation on the document. On this particular one, then, there will be a CRP. I could ask Secretariat if they have taken on board the Scientific Council deliberations. I think you have in the drafting, but perhaps you could clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In fact, actually, as our chair of the Scientific Council also knows, I mean, the process for seeking comments from the Scientific Council on matters that have a scientific component, which is what happens at the Scientific Council meeting preceding the COP, the way we've handled it is, this document was prepared by the Secretariat. We then make available to the COP both the document that went to the Scientific Council as well as the comments that were provided from the Scientific Council. So those are both online, as a part of the agenda item for consideration. My understanding, I'm looking at my colleague, our legal officer, who's also secretary of the meeting, to advise if this is correct or not, but I believe that it's now up to individual delegations to decide if they make changes to the text that they need to flag that bearing, taking advantage of all the comments that came from the council, but here we are in the COP, and I think they're not automatically transferred, is my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that clarification. If there are no other points to clarify, then can I move on to Kenya, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, Kenya would like to align her comments to those of Nigeria, Israel, and others, and believes that promoting not only sustainable livelihoods to address the illegal and unsustainable taking of wildlife, but pursuing comprehensive community-led approaches when the local community effectively participates in the design and implementation will lead to reduction in illegal killing. Such a process will encompass decreasing the cost of living with wildlife, increasing incentive for wildlife stewardship, strengthening disincentives, and increasing cost of engaging in illegal and unsustainable taking of and trade in wildlife. Kenya will therefore like to propose some changes in Resolution 11.31 by deleting the new text proposed, adding supporting community-led approaches and other context-specific measures instead of creation of alternative livelihoods. We'll provide the text to the Secretariat so that it can be reflected in the resolution, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenya, for that. I see Australia again.
Yes, thank you. Just following on from the point of clarification, if I understand it, if this document is not going to a working group, we would like to propose that the comments from the Scientific Council provided at Doc 30.1.3 Addendum 1 be considered, and we would support them because it has text in that document that relates to suggested amendments to Resolution 11.31, which is contained in Annex 1 of this document, 30.1.1. So we would support all of the Scientific Council amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia, for that. That's helpful. I think that's a general issue across several documents that perhaps the Secretariat could look through as they revise the document, so we don't need to make the same point, but thank you. That's very, very helpful. I have two final comments on this. Fauna and flora, please.
Thank you, Chair. At this first time Fauna and Flora take the floor, we would like to thank Government of Uzbekistan for their hospitality and CMS Secretariat for organizing this meeting. This intervention is on behalf of Fauna and Flora and WWF. We welcome support Resolution 11.31 and the suggestion made by Kazakhstan, United Kingdom, Kyrgyzstan, and Israel regarding disposal of confiscated specimens, national curricula, and also European Union suggestion on sustainability, on taking of wildlife and inclusion of marine species, as well as WCS suggestion on prevention of illegal taking of migratory species, and Kenya on community-led approaches. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And finally, can we have the Born Free Foundation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is a very important topic for the Born Free Foundation. Much of our work is supporting the courageous rangers and other law enforcement personnel who have to implement the rules and regulations on wildlife trafficking and trade. We strongly recommend that CMS parties respect Article 3, Paragraph 5 of the Convention, which requires that parties that are range states of a migratory species listed in Appendix 1 shall prohibit the taking of animals belonging to such species. We have a number of suggested amendments, which I will spare you reading out, but we encourage parties to support efforts to develop regional and international binding agreements to tackle wildlife trafficking, including the Council of Europe's draft Convention on the Protection of the Environment through Criminal Law, and proposals to develop a global agreement on tackling wildlife trafficking under the auspices of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, with a preference for the development of a protocol on wildlife trafficking under the UN Convention Against Transnational Organised Crime. Born Free also encourages CMS parties and non-parties to implement the United Nations General Assembly resolutions relating to wildlife trafficking, of which there have been several, including by making wildlife trafficking a serious and predicate crime, which of course then affects the kind of punishments that judges can serve. I will send the suggested amendments to text by email, and thank you for all the other very positive suggestions from parties and NGO observers. Thank you.
Thank you, Born Free Foundation. I will close this item at that. We've got some very important comments come in there. There will be a CRP that will come back to the committee so we can address the issues if there are any outstanding at that point. Thank you very much indeed for your input. It's a very important and high-profile issue for many organisations. Can we move on then to item 30.1.2, which is aquatic wild meat, and ask the Secretariat to introduce it. It's document 30.1.2, Rev 3. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. I would like to introduce document 30.1.2, Rev 3 on aquatic wild meat and the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa. This document was prepared by the Scientific Council and its Aquatic Wild Meat Working Group and the Secretariat. The document contains 4 annexes. Annex 1 contains the report of the Aquatic Wild Meat Working Group. Annex 2 contains a draft resolution to adopt the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa. Annex 3 is presented as a separate file and contains the draft action plan to be adopted through and then annexed to the resolution. Annex 4 contains draft decisions proposed for adoption. Aquatic wild meat has been on our agenda since COP12, when a resolution on this topic was adopted and a working group established. CMS was, and still is, the only global MEA addressing this specific threat to aquatic species. The document reports on the implementation of the mandates given to the working group and the Secretariat by COP13. This includes the request to the working group to support West African parties in the development of an action plan. An early draft was developed by the working group, then underwent an online range state consultation process run by our partner organization Ocean Care. This was followed by a one-day in-person meeting chaired by COP-appointed Councillor Alfred Oteng-Yeboah as part of the CMS Marine Megafauna Week last September in Senegal. I'd like to express gratitude to all involved for their support to this process. In particular, the in-person range state meeting necessary would not have been possible without the financial support of the Government of Monaco and the logistical support of PRCM, an important partner organization in coastal West Africa. Revision 3 of document 30.1.2 presents the draft agreed by range states in September. In terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to note the report contained in Annex 1 of this document, adopt the draft resolution contained in Annex 2 of this document, including the action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa, that is annexed to the resolution, which is Annex 3 currently, adopt the draft decisions as contained in Annex 4 of this document, and delete decisions 13.64 and 13.65. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that introduction. If I could open the floor and encourage you to focus your comments in relation to the text, if there are changes that you would like to make in particular. So the floor is open. Look for any interventions. Yes. Could I just clarify, we've got an indication here of BEES. Your microphone may be on, but you may want to make an intervention. If you do, this would be a good time to do it.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will do it in French. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is made on behalf of Benin Environment Society and Ocean Care. As it's the first time I'm taking the floor on behalf of these organizations, I would like, as other speakers have already done, to thank the Republic of Uzbekistan for their wonderful hospitality. We'd also like to congratulate the Secretariat on the organization of this Conference of the Parties. Chair, there is a great deal of documentation in several regions of the world, but not sufficiently in West Africa, that certain aquatic wild species such as marine turtles, manatees, crocodiles, and so on, are more frequently captured intentionally for their meat. And certain body parts are consumed and used locally. There are also traditional medicine uses and for magic traditions. And for many centuries, these animals have been important sources of protein and were harvested in a controlled manner for traditional reasons. But unfortunately, because of overfishing, in particular from foreign fishing fleets, this has reduced the possibilities for local fishers, and these animals are currently hunted and intentionally captured, not just for local and traditional consumption and use, but for commercial purposes, and this is ever growing even outside the West African region. Chair, recent research in the field shows that there's an increased risk to species that are already vulnerable due to the fragmentation of their habitat, and this applies to the manatees and dolphin species. And so we welcome the draft action plan for the protection of these aquatic species in West Africa, and we call on stakeholders to work towards a sustainable management of these activities to maintain it at a human dimension and consider the wild species by strengthening legislation and other measures. We also encourage CMS through the Scientific Council to continue with research in the field to understand the true depth of this activity and its threats to conservation. We hope that this action plan will truly help to frame and restrain the demand for aquatic wild meat, in particular wild meat, looking at regional legislation. So we encourage the parties concerned to support the action plan and to, as soon as possible, ensure it is implemented on a national level. And I would also like to thank the government of the Federal Republic of Germany for their support to the process of developing the action plan, which aims to work on the issues of aquatic wild meat in West Africa, and the Secretariat for their work, and the working group on aquatic wild meat within the Scientific Council. Thank you.
Thank you for that helpful Thank you for that helpful intervention. Could we move to the European Union, please?
Thank you, Chair. And speaking on behalf of the EU and its member states, we support the continuation of the work of Aquatic Wild Meat Working Group. And we also support the draft resolution, including an action plan to address aquatic wild meat harvests in West Africa, to make tangible progress towards the sustainable management of aquatic wild meat harvests across West Africa, and to secure the conservation status of all impacted CMS-listed species. The EU and its member states also agree with the draft decisions presented, which will contribute to improved implementation of the priorities included in the program of this working group. We hope that during the coming triennium, the Aquatic Wild Meat Working Group will carry out the task proposed in the Frontier article and increase its networking activities, bringing the issues of aquatic wild meat to the attention of the food security dialogues and facilitating consideration of aquatic wild meat harvest of Appendix 2 listed shark species, seabirds, crocodilians, and freshwater chelonians. In addition, the EU and its member states would like to bring in some research recommendations, such as those related to the improvement of food security and safety of aquatic wild meat use, and an analysis of the extent of discard cases and their impact on the availability of aquatic wild meat. We recognize the collective effort made by the CMS family on this topic, and we acknowledge the key role of parties and others in providing technical support and capacity building. And we have provided some minor comments to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Senegal.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. As it's the first time Senegal is speaking, we would like to congratulate the government of Uzbekistan and the Secretariat for the organization and warm welcome here in Samarkand. Senegal hosted the meeting that led to the conclusion of the consultation process of West African states on aquatic wild meat. So we fully and strongly support this action plan and encourage states to adopt this action plan, which we believe is essential to efficiently fight against illegal harvesting of aquatic wild meat in West African states, and those who have spoken before me have said that it's essential that we restrain this illegal trade and this unsustainable consumption of aquatic wild meat within our region. This is a region where today illegal practices have grown, and if we cannot combat these practices, we will see ever greater threats than those that we currently experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. Thank you, everyone, for these comments. If you could send any textual amendments to Secretariat again as soon as possible, there will be a CRP on this coming back to the committee in due course. So thank you very much. Thank you, Secretariat, for your work on this issue. Can we move then to 30.1.3, which is terrestrial and avian wild meat, and it's document 30.13 and document 30.13 Rev 1 and IMP 30.1.3. So, Secretariat, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, under agenda item 30.1.3, the Secretariat wishes to introduce document 30.13, terrestrial and avian wild meat. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. This document has one annex, which provides an executive summary of the report Impacts of Taking, Trade and Consumption of Terrestrial Migratory Species for Wild Meat. The full version of the report is contained in information document Inf.30.1.3. The draft decisions related to this document are contained in Annex 1 of document 30.1.1, which has just been introduced to this committee by the CMS Executive Secretary. The document also has an addendum containing comments and draft amendments to Resolution 11.31 and the proposed decision. In summary, the document reports on the implementation of Decision 13.109, addressing unsustainable use of terrestrial and avian wild meat of migratory species. With funding received from the Government of Germany, the Secretariat commissioned C4 with the preparation of an analysis on the impacts of wild meat taking, trade and consumption of CMS-listed terrestrial species. For budget reasons, so far, only the analysis for terrestrial species could be undertaken, but that for avian species is underway with funding from the Government of Switzerland. The analysis was shared for a peer review with members of the Collaborative Partnership on Sustainable Wildlife Management. The analysis found that 98% of all non-bat species listed on CMS, which have an IUCN Red List assessment, are threatened by hunting. A number of follow-up actions are being recommended to improve the management of wild meat hunting. These are reflected in the draft decisions contained in document 30.1.1. Therefore, in terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to A, take note of the executive summary in the annex of this document, B, adopt the draft decisions in Annex 2 of document 30.1.1, and C, delete decisions 13.109 to 13.112. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Again, could I open the floor for any comments, please? Thank you. Got the European Union, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the EU and its member states, and we thank the Secretariat for these initiatives and the Swiss government for the financial support to elaborate these assessments. We also wish to thank the Secretariat for the work done, and we take note of the executive summary in the annex of this document. We adopt the draft decisions in the Annex 2 of document 30.1.1, and we agree in the leading decisions 13.109 to 30.112. We furthermore welcome the report impacts of taking trade and consumption of terrestrial migratory species for wild meat. We find it important to include follow-up work based on the recommendations of the report in the resolutions and decisions under agenda item 30.11, including a mandate for the Secretariat to finalize the report on avian wild meat as necessary. And we will provide this in writing to the Secretariat. Finally, the EU and its member states encourage parties, non-parties and stakeholders to increase national efforts on population estimates, management and monitoring of wildlife species, and develop and implement science-based management plans for CMS-listed species subject to unsustainable or illegal taking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Again, if you can send any amendments, that would be helpful. I've got the Wildlife Conservation Society, please.
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. We promise to be very brief. We greatly appreciate the document, the efforts of the Secretariat, and we support adoption of the decisions. But in response, or in the context of the intervention from Australia on the previous item, we urge parties to include all of the amendments to these draft decisions that were proposed by the Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council at its July meeting, which can be found in documents 30.1.1 add 1 and 30.1.3 add 1. We wonder if it would be possible in the future just to think about it, to include this text that is recommended by the Sessional Committee after a lot of really good scientific discussion, somehow in COP documents, in a different font or something, but it was challenging going back and forth and trying to guess if those recommendations were included. But all we're suggesting is whatever the Sessional Committee recommended at its July meeting be included in the draft, in the decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wildlife Conservation Society. I don't see any other requests for the floor. There will be a CRP on this document then. If you send in comments, we'll turn that around and take on board the points you've made about inclusion of earlier work from the Scientific Committee. Thank you, Secretariat. So there will be a CRP and we will come back to it. Can we move on then to item 30.2.11, which is ecological connectivity policy aspects, and there's document 30.2.1.1 and INF 30.2.1.1. If I could ask the appointed councillor for connectivity to introduce this item. Thank you. And I'm advised by the Secretariat that we'll also take 30.2.1.2 ecological connectivity technical aspects in the same discussion. So that's document 30.2.1.2. Thank you. If the appointed councillor could introduce both, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the agenda item 30.2.1 ecological connectivity, the Secretariat wishes to introduce the documents COP14, Doc 30.2.1.1 with the INF Doc 30.2.1.1 on ecological connectivity policy aspects, and COP14 Doc 30.2.1.2 on ecological connectivity technical aspects. These documents were prepared by the Secretariat. The contents of these documents were revised by the Scientific Council Working Group on Ecological Connectivity at its first meeting held on June 2023 and through further consultations, and by the Scientific Council at its sixth meeting of the Sessional Committee in July 2023. In terms of structure, document 30.2.1.1 Ecological Connectivity Policy Aspects contains 3 annexes. Annex 1 contains a draft consolidated resolution, Annex 2 contains a draft resolution, and Annex 3 contains draft decisions. Document 30.2.1.2 Ecological Connectivity Technical Aspects contains 4 annexes. Annex 1 contains a survey on databases to support relevant analysis and synthesis of information on connectivity as per Decision 13.114A. Annex 2 contains a survey on connectivity data sources as per Decision 13.114D. Annex 3 contains an overview of linkages between migratory species connectivity and ecosystem resilience as per Decision 13.114C, while Annex 4 contains priorities for future research on connectivity as per Decision 13.114D. There is also a related information document, INF 30.2.1.1, which contains a preliminary list of existing initiatives related to ecological connectivity in which CMS might engage. In summary, these documents report on the many initiatives of the CMS Secretariat, of the Scientific Council with its Working Group on Ecological Connectivity, and of the Sessional Committee, including with the most intense involvement of the CMS Executive Secretary and members of the Secretariat in highest level negotiations, which have contributed to have connectivity recognized as a major component of global conservation strategies for the years to come. The documents highlight the importance of connectivity for all aspects of conservation and sustainable use, provide a very detailed overview of the many existing initiatives on connectivity, offer a vision of the unique role CMS plays for connectivity, and stimulate new initiatives to further support this role of CMS. In terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended with reference to Doc COP14 30.2.1.1 to adopt the draft consolidated resolution contained in Annex 2 of the document, adopt the draft decisions as contained in Annex 3 of this document, and delete Decision 13.113 to 13.115. With reference to Doc 30.2.1.2, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to review the reports in Annexes 1 to 4 and to provide guidance to the Scientific Council and Secretariat as regards further work on these topics in line with the proposed consolidated resolution and draft decisions contained in document 30.2.1.1 Ecological Connectivity Policy Aspects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fernando, for that excellent introduction to the issue. And connectivity has become a very popular word now. It never used to be mentioned very much in conservation circles, but the work here has been instrumental in moving it forward, so thank you. Could I open the floor for any interventions? Yes, European Union, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the EU and its member states, and our comments are on agenda item 30.2.1.1. So we would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the document. We acknowledge the different circumstances and the challenges of countries to build a coherent network of protected areas, and moreover to coordinate with neighboring countries in finding solutions. Nevertheless, the EU and its member states call upon all parties to find solutions in order to improve ecological connectivity and to cooperate among different parties to implement the political and the administrative measures that may lead to a healthy, ecologically connected systems with which supports more biodiversity and increased resilience to face global change, including climate change. We support the consolidation of Resolution 12.26, Rev COP13, Resolution 12.7, Rev COP13, and the adoption of new decisions presented in this document with some amendments. In particular, we suggest to include in the draft resolution the words habitat connection without hindrance to cover ecological connectivity, as not only species would benefit from it, and habitats also need this connectivity. We have provided our amendments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. Could move to the United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the Secretariat and the Scientific Council for their work on this key topic. The UK supports the consolidation of Resolution 12.26, Rev COP13, and Resolution 12.7, Rev COP13. We consider the draft consolidated resolution contained in Annex 2 to be a good start. However, we have a number of proposed amendments to put forward. Many are minor, but there are a few more substantial proposals, for example, a new operative paragraph on reporting. Would you like me to go through them now, or would be happy to submit them in writing to the Secretariat? It's about 14 paragraphs that we'd want to amend.
Yeah, I think if you were able to introduce them to give us a sense of the change rather than all verbatim, then we can take it as a submission, a written submission as well. But if you can summarise where the comments are.
Okay, yeah. So in the preambular paragraphs, we were suggesting adding a new preambular paragraph to refer to the Strategic Plan for Migratory Species 2024 to 2032, that if it's adopted at this COP, so that would be in text in brackets. And then in one of the further down preambular paragraphs where it refers to recalling Resolution 12.21, Rev COP13, it's just a note that that resolution wasn't amended at COP13, so that bracketed text should be removed and potentially replaced with Rev COP14 if the amendments are agreed at this COP to Resolution 12.21. And further down, there's a preambular paragraph that begins welcoming 12.11 Rev COP13 on flyways, on guidance on global flyway conservation and options for policy arrangements. We would propose deleting guidance on global flyway conservation and options for policy arrangements and replacing that with flyways, because that's the name of the resolution. That text was the name of Resolution 1010, so we think that should be amended. Further down in the preambular paragraph that starts recognising that transboundary area-based conservation measures, including networks of protected areas, etc. There's a reference in there to UN General Assembly Resolution 75/271, and we would make some suggestions to change what that resolution refers to, because at the moment it's a mixture of wording from OPS 1, 2, 9 and 11, and we'd propose that this wording is changed to wording from OPS 2 in that resolution. And then in the next preambular paragraph, we've got some suggested changes to the reference to the BBNJ, to change that, welcome in the adoption of the agreement and capitalising the first letters of the BBNJ wording. And then we'd propose a new preambular paragraph around ecologically, biologically significant marine areas, because we think it's important that there's still some reference in this consolidated resolution to those areas. there's the paragraph, preamble paragraph recalling the Gandhi Declaration, which would query this paragraph and suggest it should be either deleted or amended because obviously the GBF has now been agreed, so it doesn't read quite right at present. Moving on to the operative paragraphs. There's a suggestion in OP1, or there is text in OP1 relating to implementing the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. I just question the inclusion of this reference to the Biodiversity Framework. It just seems a bit odd the way it's written, and would suggest that if there's consensus to keep it in, that it's perhaps moved into a sub-paragraph. And also it should refer to the Global Biodiversity Framework, not just Biodiversity Framework. There's a couple of typos that we can put in writing. In opposite paragraph 7, we think it would be more appropriate for to encourage parties to support rather than request parties. So we'd make that suggested change. And in opposite paragraph 11, we'd suggest after designation that there's text inserted, say, and effective management in both places in that paragraph where designation is used. And then in OP23, we've got similar amendments around the BBNJ references. And opposite paragraph 26, it should refer to document 30.2.1.2 rather than 30.2.1. I'm nearly there. And then we'd suggest or propose a new operative paragraph after OP28 along the lines of request the Secretariat to report to the Conference of the Parties at each of its ordinary meetings on the progress of implementation of this resolution. We just think given the importance of ecological networks and the ongoing need to report to the COP, we think this should be set out in the resolution. So those are all the proposals, or the sort of gist of our proposals for the resolution. We have got some suggestions for the decisions as well, so would you like me to go through those now as well?
I think, unless they're very radical, I think it's, we've got the as you say, the gist of where your comments lie. On the decisions, are you changing the meaning in a substantive way, or is it simply wording?
Well, the main one really is draft decision 14BB. We think it should be the Scientific Council is requested rather than shall. Okay. And then there's just some wording in there that we think should be deleted to help with the readability of the decision.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think in terms of time, we've got the flavour of where the comments are. I think if you send in the comments, then we'll look at these in the decision in the CRP. I think if you're happy to do it that way around, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United Kingdom, for that. If I could move then to Wildlife Conservation Society.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to take the floor again. I have two very tiny suggested edits, and let me explain them, because they're both on the same issue. As we all know, Goal A of the Global Biodiversity Framework commits parties to long-term maintenance, enhancement, and restoration of the, quote, integrity, connectivity, and resilience of all ecosystems by 2050. This was an intentional compromise reflecting the critical and interrelated nature of these ecosystem attributes. Structural and functional connectivity are aspects of ecological integrity, which I note is a continuum, not a binary issue. Assessments of ecological integrity are critical to inform conservation planning, particularly for migratory species. We recommend, in fact, that the Scientific Council examine this interrelationship between these elements of ecosystems: connectivity, integrity, resilience. We therefore recommend two tiny edits. in operative, which we've sent already to the Secretariat, amending operative paragraph 4 of the draft resolution in Annex 2 of document 30.2.1.1, where it says threats to connectivity, we suggest threats to connectivity and ecological integrity. And in draft decision 14.BB, paragraph C, in the same document, where it says migratory species connectivity and ecosystem resilience, we suggest ecosystem integrity and resilience. We believe that will generate some really useful analysis by the sessional committee of the Scientific Council and assist parties in implementing the GBF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Excuse me. We'll close the list now on this. I think we've been around this quite well. So I've got BirdLife International, WWF, and finally Egypt. So BirdLife, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have a few small, slightly editorial points. If I could just itemize those, and I will send you text anon. The first relates to adding references to restoration and or protection in a number of places in the text. For example, the preambular paragraph on page 7, as well as in operative paragraphs 1, 3, 12, 24, and 25. And we feel also that the references to the particular needs of birds, such as molt sites, in preambular paragraph on page 7, and to flyways in operative paragraphs 1 and 15 would be very helpful. It would be good to correct the references to important bird areas and key biodiversity areas in operative paragraphs 21, 22, and 25. And finally, it would be good to add a reference to the CMS Atlas on Animal Migration in Decision 14 CCA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, BirdLife, and thank you for focusing on the text. That's very helpful. WWF, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as this is the first time WWF has taken the floor, we'd like to join others in thanking Uzbekistan for its hospitality, for hosting this meeting in this beautiful city, which has always been on my personal wish list. And we'd like to thank the Secretariat for their organisation, and especially you, Chair, for your adroit chairmanship of this committee. It seems to us, reading the resolution and the table of amendments, that a lot of the habitat-specific references that were in the old texts have been removed, but some of them have been left in relation to issues like flyways. And this conveys the impression that the resolution is primarily about birds. It particularly lacks specific references to aquatic and especially marine habitats. And for example, on page 14 in the edits, we see that the reference to the Indian Ocean Southeast Asia Turtle MOU is removed. So we would plead for the two table boxes on page 14, that one and the preceding one that refers to important marine mammal areas, to be reconsidered for inclusion in the text. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WWF. And finally, Egypt, if we can. Egypt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Egypt also supports already previous interventions, especially the last two, whether WWF or Wildlife Conservation Society. Having said that, the issue of ecological connectivity in terms of policies and guidance, we have to say that CMS should be thankful for all of the work that already been done in the last few years, and the way how we were able to convince IPBES to start this kind of assessment as well, in a way that results should be coming very, very, very soon. However, when you connect ecological connectivity in terms of ecosystem restoration, integrity, and resilience, It's very good, but maybe we need some kind of terminology telling us what does it mean all of this. Yes, it is true that GBF made it very clear, especially Target 2, about the ecological restoration, rehabilitation, and there are very, very specific indicators for all of this. But when it comes to integrity and resilience to climate change, whatever, that will make it more complicated, and that may perhaps explain why more guidance are needed. So we support the draft decisions based on all of the amendments made by UK and other interventions as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. Thank you, everyone, for these interventions. There will be a CRP. What I intend to do then is keep the two issues, 30.2.1.1 and 30.2.1.2, together when they come back in CRP for our deliberations. That seems sensible to keep the two things together. Thank you for that, and once again, thank you to the appointed councillor and his colleagues for taking this work forward. Can we move on then to item 30.2.2, which is Transfrontier Conservation Areas, and it's documents 30.2.2 Rev 2 and document 30.2 Addendum 1. If we could ask the Secretariat to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, under this agenda item, the Secretariat wishes to introduce document 30.2.2 on Transfrontier Conservation Areas. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. This document has one annex containing a set of draft decisions. The document also has an addendum which provides the recommendation of the Scientific Council to adopt the decisions. In summary, the document reports on the implementation of decisions 13.116 and 13.117 as part of the EU-funded cross-regional wildlife program, which is implemented by UNODC, CITES, and CMS. The Secretariat supported the East African community with the establishment of a transboundary conservation area working group, and the governments of Mozambique and Tanzania with the advancement of the Niassa-Selous Transfrontier Conservation Area. The Secretariat also commissioned the UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Center, WCMC, to develop a tool that can help identify opportunities for transboundary conservation. Until the end of the program later this year, the Secretariat will continue supporting a number of countries and regional economic communities in Southern and Eastern Africa with the advancement of transfrontier conservation areas. The set of draft decisions seeks to review the tool developed by WCMC and consult with countries from the region as to its functionality. In terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to A, adopt the decisions contained in the annex to this document, and B, to delete decisions 13.116 to 13.118. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Again, I could open the floor for any intervention comments. See Zimbabwe, please.
Chair, we take note of the document 30.2.2 Rev 2 and its content on the web-based tool to identify existing protected areas in Africa that are spatially adjacent and ecologically connected across country boundaries, and such landscapes that have the potential for harmonized management developed by the UN Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Center. We appreciate the work and effort that went into this so far. We also note the decision 14.AA requests members of the Southern Africa Development Committee to use the UNEP WCMC pilot transboundary tool to identify potential opportunities for transboundary conservation using data from the World Database on Protected Areas and the World Database on Key Biodiversity Areas. We also note the document indicates in paragraph 6.a that, I quote, the CMS Secretariat conducted consultations with countries in the target areas, regions, on 2020, end of quote. However, there are indications that consultations with SADC member states was not done satisfactorily, and many SADC member states were not consulted at all. Therefore, our concerns and views were not considered, Mr. Chair. Whilst we appreciate the potential usefulness of the tool, we still need to understand various aspects of the tool and ascertain whether it is fit for purpose in our context. We are also uncertain on whether the tool will replace our own homegrown guidelines and organic approach that we have been using and adapting in the SADC region for identifying potential TFCAs or not. In light of the above, Mr. Chairman, we propose that adoption of the decision 14AA be deferred to COP15 to allow a CMS Secretariat through its commissioned entity to conduct a thorough and conclusive consultation process. I submit, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for that update in terms of consultation and your thoughts on the document. Let me take some comments from others, and then I'll come back and suggest a way forward. I've got Uganda next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Uganda wishes to take note of document 30.2.2. We do appreciate the support provided by the Secretariat to the East African Community region. We wish to report that we actively participated and immensely benefited from the support under this program. The delegation from the East African community traveled to the Southern African region to benchmark under this program on how the Transfrontier programs operate. And this has helped us to formulate a very highly detailed East African Community Wildlife Conservation Policy 2023. We are in advanced stages of formulating the East African Community Wildlife Conservation Strategy, and one of the key provisions of this draft strategy is to promote Transfrontier conservation programs. Uganda wishes to align itself to the submission by Zimbabwe on the need for capacity building in the use of the proposed tools, and this could be done through technical support to the parties involved. We thank you and thank the Secretariat once again for the support.
Thank you, Uganda. United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the Secretariat. We thank the Secretariat for this paper and welcome the work that has been undertaken. In relation to the draft decisions, we have a couple of proposed amendments. Would you like me to go through those now?
Yes, please. Yep.
Given the 7th Scientific Council Sessional Committee meeting is due to take place in September, to enable flexibility and allow more time for reporting, we would propose that decisions 14AAB and 14CCB are amended to request reporting to the 7th and/or 8th meeting of the Scientific Council Sessional Committee. We would also propose that an amendment is made to draft decision 14BB to move the words "subject to the availability of external resources" up to the start of the decision. So draft decision 14BB would therefore read, "The Scientific Council is requested, subject to the availability of external resources to," and then the draft decision continues. we can provide these amendments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you. United Kingdom, yes, if you could, that would be helpful. Egypt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Egypt supports interventions already given by Zimbabwe and Uganda because this issue are very crucial to us. However, we don't want to people, especially all of this decision to be implemented, they have to be presented to decision makers. So when you have something like ecological network, large ecological regions, whatever, decision makers can be a little bit confused with protected areas, with ecological connectivity, ecosystem integrity, whatever. So maybe it's time that terminologies being used by CMS need to be put together in a way that by end of the COP, for example, it could be very useful to make the differences between all what's already being said over the last couple of days. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt, for these wise words. I don't see any other calls for the floor. What I suggest we do with this is that we refer this to the institutional cross-cutting working group so that you can have time to take further comment and discussion around the issues that we heard, especially in terms of the wording for decisions and or how to take the decisions forward, if that would be an acceptable way forward. I think we need more time for you to discuss the issues that we heard raised today. Would that be an acceptable way to take this? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your comments on that. Let's move on then, if we can, to item 20.2.3, community participation and livelihoods. And it's Doc 30.2.3, 30.2.3 Addendum 1, and INF 30.2.3. Again, excuse me, if I could ask the Secretariat to introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, under this agenda item, the Secretariat wishes to introduce document 30.2.3, Community Participation and Livelihoods. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. This document has two annexes. Annex 1 contains a draft resolution. Annex 2 contains a set of draft decisions. There is also a related information document, Inf. 30.2.3, which contains the analysis of case studies as requested by COP14. The document also has an addendum which contains the recommendation of the Scientific Council to COP to adopt the draft resolution and decisions with a small amendment. In summary, the document reports on the implementation of decisions 13.119 to 13.121. As instructed, the Secretariat prepared and circulated a standard template for the submission of successful cases of local community involvement in the conservation of species. With the support from the Government of the UK, 78 case studies were compiled and analysed and implications assessed for future actions to assist parties in using community-based initiatives for the conservation of CMS-listed species. The outcome of this analysis is contained in INFDOC 30.2.3. At the same time, the Secretariat, as part of the Central Asian Mammals Initiative, commissioned a study, Potential for Community-Based Wildlife Management of Kami Species, which will be finalized and consulted with range countries shortly. The analysis and study have shown that community engagement is important for the conservation of many migratory species. Human-wildlife conflicts are often most effectively addressed through the involvement of communities. Based on the analysis of the collected case studies, a set of 10 key guiding principles were identified for the successful inclusion of communities living in the range of migratory species in the conservation of those species. To provide parties with long-term guidance, the principles have been included in a draft resolution contained in Annex 1 of this document, which is proposed to COP for adoption. In terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to A. Adopt the draft resolution contained in Annex 1 of this document, including the key guiding principles. B. Adopt the draft decision contained in Annex 2 of this document. And C. Delete decisions 13.119 to 13.121. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Again, I open the floor for any comments at this stage. Yes, United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair. Following consultations, we have amended the draft resolution within this document to include an additional preambular paragraph, which is the following. Recognising that for the purpose of this resolution, communities is intended to be understood to encompass the broader community, including Indigenous peoples and local communities. We will provide this text to the Secretariat directly. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom, and thank you for your support for the work. European Union, please.
Yes, thank you. The EU and its member states thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the document and agree in adopting the resolution presented in Annex 1 and the decision presented in Annex 2 and delete decisions 13.119 to 13.121. The EU and its member states accept to include the insertion proposed by the Scientific Council and dispersal zones after valuable corridors. And we welcome the suggestion by the UK that communities should be understood as encompassing all kinds of communities, including Indigenous peoples and local communities. Furthermore, in that case, we believe there is no need to specify local communities separately, and we will provide you with some amendments in writing to reflect this throughout the text. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, for that. Egypt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For us, this issue of community participation and livelihood is very, very crucial. It's not only based on case studies or analysis, whatever. The decisions should include what is already happening in other conventions as well, either under the mainstreaming of biodiversity into all development sector or synergies among MEAs, multilateral environmental. Having said that, one of the most priorities of MBSAP, especially for CBD, is to get all of these people involved in the whole process. Otherwise, we will keep our mistakes continuing on. We fail to deliver what we have already made. We need to involve all of these people, not to engage them by getting them participated in the planning, but even in the implementation as well. For that reason, we think this issue should be a cross-cutting issue, especially in the preparation of MBSAP and other conventions as well, in terms of collaboration and cooperation as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Egypt, if you could have conservation force, please.
Thank you, Chair. And being the first time we take the floor, allow us to thank the government of Uzbekistan for the wonderful setup of this conference and the Secretariat for the good preparation. Having said that, Chair, this is a very crucial issue for conservation. There are, and we completely endorse what Egypt has just said, this is not only about pure engagement, but it's participation of IPLCs in the decision making. There has been a very good analysis of a UCN that you can find as information document on the last CITES conference of the parties, of which are the MIAs which have involved completely the IPLCs in the decision makings, and which are the MIAs which are lacking these involvements. And unfortunately, this convention and CITES are behind. Because you see CBD as a proper forum, IPBES as also a proper forum, climate change and others, like Egypt was saying, have devised proper mechanism, not only to purely engage, but to have communities participate as first actors in the decision-making of the conference. So we are calling, Chair, for a little bit of courage from the parties to go beyond what is in these well-meaning resolutions, and maybe to link this document with the document 18 on synergies. Because if we say in that document that we need to explore options for special accreditation of NGOs to the conference, I would say that it would be much more important to have a special accreditation of IPLCs to the conference and provide a proper forum to listen to their knowledge. It's not peer-reviewed knowledge, Chair, it's traditional knowledge, and as is crucial importance in the conservation of the species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Again, if you have any changes to the text to suggest, then please send them to the Secretariat. Traditional knowledge for me is very, very important in nature conservation around the world. I've got one final intervention, which is from the Born Free Foundation.
Thank you, Chair. I don't always try to have the last word, but Born Free is supportive of efforts to fully involve local communities in the conservation and management of migratory species and the mitigation of human-wildlife conflict. And I would like to support or echo the comments of Conservation Force that we need to give these people a voice in this sort of forum. It's vital to take into account the potential impacts on migratory species of their utilisation at specific points along their migration routes, and ensure that management practices aimed at benefiting local communities through the utilisation of migratory species do not result in detrimental impacts which could adversely affect their conservation status and, by extension, their habitats. The measure of these, whether it's sustainable or not, is usually very numerical. And I think when you consider the impact on the habitat, the ecosystem services of each animal provided to that habitat, that's as important as whether or not it's numerically sustainable, the offtake. So CMS provides a logical platform through which to foster collaboration between all the stakeholders along the migration routes of listed species. Now we have a couple of minor amendments, additional text for operative paragraph 3, where it says requests parties and other stakeholders to make information available to communities about migratory species, to emphasize how individuals of a species may have shared value across a migration route. We'd like to add, and to foster collaboration between communities along migration routes and other stakeholders to secure the conservation of migratory species, the connectivity of the migration routes, and the long-term sustainability of their shared value among all relevant communities. And an amendment to paragraph 5 of the annex to the resolution replacing the current wording says, achieving sustainable use of migratory species is challenging. We'd like it to say, ensuring that any use of migratory species is sustainable is challenging, requiring range-wide information on species population status. Otherwise, we'd like the COP to adopt the draft decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Born Free, for that. If you again could send in comments, there will be a CRP on this important issue, so I suggest that we take the comments that you've got and move through onto the other agenda items. So thank you for your input there. Just a quick check on timing. In consultation with the Secretariat, we're aware that the working groups that we've established need time to work this evening. So I propose that we do stick to our timetable today and finish at 6 o'clock, or very shortly after it, so that we allow time for the working groups to undertake their work. With that, I'd like to move on into item 30.3, which relates to infrastructure, and to begin with 30.3.1, which is infrastructure and impact assessment, and it's document 30.3.1 Rev 1 and INF 30.3.1. And Secretariat to introduce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, under agenda item 30.3.1, the Secretariat wishes to introduce the document 30.3.1 Rev 1, Infrastructure Development and Migratory Species. This document was prepared by the Scientific Council and the Secretariat. The document has two annexes. Annex 1 contains proposed amendments to Resolution 7.2, Rev COP12, Impact Assessment and Migratory Species. Annex 2 contains two sets of draft decisions. The first on infrastructure development and migratory species, and the second on impact assessment and migratory species. In summary, the document reports on the implementation of decisions 13.130 to 13.134. A meeting of the Scientific Council Intersessional Working Group on Linear Infrastructure was organized by the Secretariat with funding and in collaboration with the German government and held in June 2022. The working group developed recommendations which have been reflected in the proposed amendments to Resolution 7.2 Rev COP12 and the two sets of draft decisions. The document also addresses cumulative effects assessments for which the Secretariat has identified a need, particularly in relation to aquatic species where this is not currently common practice. The recommendations of the working group aim to address significant gaps in infrastructure development planning regarding migratory species. The recommendations include increasing data availability and accessibility for infrastructure planners, developers, and the science and conservation community, and increasing awareness and capacity of infrastructure planners, developers, and financiers to include migratory species in their work. Therefore, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to adopt the proposed amendments to Resolution 7.2 Rev COP12 contained in Annex 1 of this document, adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 2 of this document, and delete decisions 13.130 to 13.134. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that introduction. Again, I'd like to open the floor for comments. Yes, United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's important to adequately take account of the environmental impacts, including cumulative impacts, when considering infrastructure development. And while we welcome the proposals to strengthen recommendation in this resolution, however, we should recognise the need for flexibility in how parties deliver their commitments according to their national legislation and processes. For example, within the UK, cumulative impacts are assessed as part of an environmental impact assessment rather than a standalone process as implied by the wording of the resolution. We therefore propose amending paragraph 1 of the resolution to read, emphasises the importance of good quality environmental impact assessment, which includes an assessment of cumulative effects and strategic environmental assessment, etc. We also propose a small number of drafting changes which we can provide in writing. I would, however, like to highlight one now. The terms subject to available resources and subject to available external resources seems to be used interchangeably and inconsistently across the papers for this COP. We would like to see consistent use of the term and we would prefer subject to available resources. It is unclear to us what external means, and noting resources can refer to both financial resources and people. We think this could lead to some perverse outcomes. Should our other parties agree, would it be possible for the Secretariat to review and ensure consistency across all the COP documents? Thank you.
Thank you very much. United Kingdom will certainly refer that request to the Secretariat, and hopefully we will be able to take that forward. I see the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and the Member States welcome the document 30.3.1 and the proposed amendments to Resolution 7.2 and support the amended text proposed by the Scientific Council and the Secretariat. The EU and its Member States also welcome and support the draft decisions laid down in this document and encourage parties to observe and fulfill the requests made in this chapter, including those related to the impact assessment and migratory species. The EU and its Member States request parties to take into account ecological connectivity and ecological restoration when planning new linear infrastructure and encourage parties to ensure involvement of relevant businesses and public authorities in order to embed biodiversity conservation into public and private decision-making. We furthermore have some amendments to restructure the draft decisions without affecting the content, and we will provide our amendments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I wonder if I could ask a question, whether your amendments are substantive. Is this a paper we should refer to the working group, or do you think it's straightforward textual amendments?
Yeah, they may be quite substantive, so it might be useful to refer them to a working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll take some further comments and then we'll come back and summarize what we're doing. United Arab Emirates, please.
Thank you, Chair. As the delegation of the United Arab Emirates addresses this assembly for the first time, we wish to extend our deepest gratitude to our gracious host, the Republic of Uzbekistan, for their exceptional hospitality and the excellent organization of this conference. The delegation of the UAE appreciates the efforts to address the impacts of infrastructure development on migratory species. As detailed in the document, the UAE recognizes the importance of EIAs and SEAs in safeguarding migratory species amidst infrastructure development. We support the comprehensive assessments, legal framework revisions, consideration of species recovery potential, and the encouragement of biodiversity management plans. However, regarding the proposed text in Annex 1, specifically to BES, for parties to publicly disclose and share information on infrastructure plans and assessments, the UAE believes in a more flexible approach that respects national policies and circumstances. Therefore, we propose an alternative text that encourages transparency and international cooperation in a manner that is feasible and aligned with national regulations, fostering a collaborative environment for the exchange of best practices without mandating specific mechanisms for public disclosure. The UAE is committed to the principle of sustainable development and biodiversity conservation and support international cooperation and dialogue on these matters. We look forward to constructive discussions on the proposed amendments and draft decisions, aiming to ensure they effectively address the conservation needs of migratory species in the context of global infrastructure development. Thank you.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates. I'll take one more comment from India, then I'll sum this up because it is moving towards the working group to develop the CRP. But India, please.
Thank you, Chair. India notes that the working group's findings that reveal significant gaps in infrastructure development planning regarding migratory species and underpins the need for awareness on the importance of animal movements and lack the capacity to implement international policies and guidelines. India also notes that unplanned activities has adverse impacts on habitats, poses a threat to migratory species, and considering this, we are implementing an eco-friendly guidelines for mitigating linear infrastructure, impacts of linear infrastructure on wildlife. Chair, there is a need for the parties to have dialogue with relevant stakeholders and build capacities in acknowledging securing habitats of wildlife in linear project development. Having said that, we wish to draw the attention of this House to the paragraph D of Decision 14AA contained in UNEP CMS COP14 Doc 30.3.1 Rev 1 Annex 2 to reconsider the paragraph considering the sensitivity due to geopolitical situations and the practical implementation of the decision by the parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, India, for these comments. I think the most effective way to take this forward then is to refer the paper to the institutional and cross-cutting working group and ask them to look at the textual changes and the potentially more substantive issues that may be behind the document overall. Is that an acceptable way forward?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And it will come back to the committee as a CRP in due course. Excuse me. Let's move on then to 30.3.2, which is renewable energy and power lines. And it's document 30.3.2, document 30.3.2, addendum 1. And again, Secretariat will introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, under the agenda item 13.3.2, the Secretariat wishes to introduce the document 30.3.2, Renewable Energy and Migratory Species. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. The discussion on the document will take place in the Institutional and Cross-Cutting Working Group. This document contains two annexes. Annex 1 contains a summary of the activities carried out by the CMS Energy Task Force, and Annex 2 contains draft decisions. The document also has an addendum where the Scientific Council's comments and recommendations to the COP are provided. This document reports on progress to implement Resolution 1011, Rev COP13, Power Lines and Migratory Birds, Resolution 11.27, Rev COP13, Renewable Energy and Migratory Species, and related decisions 13.106 to 13.108. The document highlights the activities carried out by the CMS Secretariat to implement Resolution 11.27 and on the activities carried out by the Energy Task Force, including the update of its work plan, the meetings held and the proposals for elaborating new strategic documents within the remit of the task force. Since its established, the ETF has focused on migratory birds, but its terms of reference note that the ETF will cover all migratory taxa as identified by the CMS and its associated instruments, and that the timing and extent of taxonomic expansions shall be decided by the ETF members, depending on available funding. A new decision, therefore, is proposed to extend the scope of the ETF to cetaceans. In terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to take note of the detailed list of activities carried out by the ETF contained in Annex 1 of this document, adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 2 of this document, and delete decisions 13.106 to 13.108. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for the introduction. Again, I'd like to open the floor for comments. Yes, European Union, please.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states appreciate the information provided by the Secretariat and would like to thank the Energy Task Force for the growing activity and the useful outputs during the last intersessional period. The development of new renewable energy infrastructure is essential in the face of climate change and the need to ensure a better environment and a more sustainable future for humankind. But at the same time, these developments pose an increasing threat to migratory species if the location of these infrastructures negatively affects migratory corridors and sensitive habitats for the reproduction, feeding, resting, and wintering. Most of the parties, and by extent their environmental authorities, are facing important challenges for performing high-quality environmental impact assessments and biodiversity and inclusive spatial planning to ensure the conservation of biodiversity. We encourage parties to engage with the Energy Task Force to learn and to improve the way we could manage and reconcile renewable energy development and migratory species protection. The EU and its member states expressed their support for the draft decision proposed by the Secretariat, including the amendments proposed by the Scientific Council, but we have some minor amendments and would furthermore like to strengthen the text with some requests to the parties and the Energy Task Force to encourage and enable the energy sector to take action in order to progressively reduce negative impacts on biodiversity, increase positive impacts, and promote actions to ensure sustainable patterns of production. And we will provide you with these amendments in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. If we could move then to the whale and dolphin conservation, please.
As it's the first time WDC has taken the floor, we would like to thank the government of Uzbekistan and the CMS Secretariat for hosting and organising this conference of the parties. WDC would like to propose a minor change to the proposed amendments from Scientific Council Document 30.3.2, Addendum 1, on Draft Decision 14.AA. We would suggest that the current wording around habitat loss and degradation is unnecessarily restrictive and should be replaced with impacts on migratory species, their ecosystems, and align with the relevant wording in the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. We will send our suggestion to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Whale and Dolphin Conservation. I then see Egypt and United Kingdom. So Egypt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Egypt is part of the whole Energy Task Force and have made considerable contribution toward what we call conservation of soaring birds and many, many other birds. The experience that were developed in Europe, actually, when we try to implement them, we need some kind of adoption or adaptation in a way that can suit countries, especially North Africa and Middle East. But best practice that can be used or can be benefited from Egypt need to be highlighted, because it was the first time that all participants, all benefit sharing, all the stakeholders related to the whole issue of energy, or especially renewable energy, were able to work together, not only by preparing guidelines, but implementing them and training as well. Capacity building is not enough. Capacity development, it means proper allocation of resources, whether they are financial or policy development or whatever. So we thanks Secretary and the task force for the work that already have been done. But as I said, Egyptian experience need to be explored by other countries in a way that we can look at the whole issue and all its dimensions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Egypt. I'll take a final comment on this item at the moment. Anyway, from United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks the Secretariat for this paper and welcomes the work undertaken by the Energy Task Force. We support the draft decisions in Annex 2, apart from draft decision 14AA, subparagraph D. The reporting request being asked of parties is very broad, and we would recommend that the reporting request is narrowed down to reduce the burden on parties. We propose that the wording of subparagraph D is the same as that previously directed to parties in decision 13.18, subparagraph C, so that it just asks parties to report on actions taken under the decision and not the resolution. The amended paragraph would therefore read 14AA subparagraph D, parties are requested to report to COP15 on the above activities in their national reports. We will provide this amendment in writing to the Secretariat. Lastly, we have a question for the Secretariat on reporting by the Energy Task Force. It isn't clear to us if there should be something included in the draft decision to the Energy Task Force to request it to report to the Standing Committee or the COP. Clarity on this would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. And this is going to be referred into the working group now, so perhaps that's the place to get that clarification. Thank you for that. I will take one final comment on this issue, but I do want to move on. United Arab Emirates, please.
Thank you, Chair. The delegation of the United Arab Emirates acknowledges the comprehensive efforts detailed in the document to address the impact of renewable energy infrastructure on migratory species. The UAE is a proponent of sustainable development, actively integrating renewable energy solutions that consider the conservation of biodiversity and migratory species. The UAE, represented by the Mohammed bin Zayed Raptor Fund, has contributed to a successful initiative such as the retrofitting of power lines in Mongolia to protect the Saker falcon, a project highlighted in the CMS Energy Task Force's case studies. This initiative underscores the potential for simple, cost-effective solutions to significantly mitigate the impact of energy infrastructure on migratory species, achieving a 97.3% reduction in electrocution rates for the Saker falcon. While supporting the objective outlined in the proposed draft decisions, the UAE emphasizes the importance of leveraging such successful case studies to inform and enhance global efforts in reconciling renewable energy development with conservation of migratory species. We encourage the inclusion of innovative technologies and practices in mitigating impacts on migratory species, and suggest that experiences and lessons learned from projects like the one supported by the MBZRF to be integrated into the guidance for project developers and policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates. I'm well aware of the support you've given to birds of prey, to the Saker falcon in particular, and it's been instrumental in delivering what is a really world-leading outcome in terms of the support to the birds of prey population. So thank you very much for that. What I'd like to do then, given the range of comments and the substantive nature of some, is refer this to the working group, which should work on it and then develop a CRP to come back to us. If that's an agreeable way forward. It just needs a bit more discussion, I think. Thank you for that. What I'd like to do is do one more item before we close for this evening. We're moving into section 30.4, which deals with threats to migratory species. I'd like to jump out of sequence a little bit on the annotated agenda to consider wildlife disease, because I know the working group has developed its own timetable for consideration of this issue. So it would be very helpful if you could agree that we take wildlife disease now, and we'll cover the other items under item 30 tomorrow morning. Thank you for that. So item 30.4.3 deals with wildlife disease, and it's document 30.4.3 and INF 30.4.3. I think a representative from the Scientific Council, Ruth Cromie, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under the agenda item 30.4.3, the COP-appointed Councillor for Wildlife Health wishes to introduce the document 30.4.3 on wildlife disease. This document was prepared by the Secretariat with input from the Scientific Council. The document contains 4 annexes. Annex 1 contains the key messages and key recommendations of the review of migratory species and health, a review of migration and wildlife disease dynamics and the health of migratory species within the context of One Health. This review is available as an information document 30.4.3. This review was kindly funded by the German and UK governments, and I'm personally very grateful to the University of Edinburgh and the team of dozens of global experts who contributed to this significant piece of work. Annex 2 contains the proposed changes to Resolution 12.6 on wildlife disease and migratory species. Annex 3 contains a new proposed resolution on avian influenza. Annex 4 contains draft decisions directed to the parties, Scientific Council and Secretariat. In summary, document 30.4.3 reports on the renewed interest in health, including zoonoses, that is, infections transmissible between animals and humans, following COP14, which took place in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. Both the review and the revised draft resolution 12.6 on wildlife disease and migratory species highlight the interconnectivity of health across sectors, the drivers of disease emergence, typically the same as the drivers of population decline, and also the actions required to reduce risks across the board. Within One Health, wildlife health is often the poor relation, and lack of focus on the health of the environment leads to negative health consequences for us all. In addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, in the months following COP13, changes in the H5N1 highly pathogenic avian influenza virus apparently allowed better transmission between and maintenance within wild bird populations, allowing the infection to spread into novel settings of breeding colonies of seabirds and with geographical spread from Europe into North America, then South America, and onwards into the Antarctic region. The virus, originating from the poultry sector, represents a significant conservation challenge and has already caused significant mortality in waterbirds, seabirds and raptors, but also in marine mammals. The situation remains dynamic, with concern for the Antarctic and the subantarctic regions. Its zoonotic and human pandemic potential is also concerning. The need for CMS to play a role in health has never been clearer. So based on the requests of the 6th Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council, the review was finalised and amended Resolution 12.6 on wildlife disease and migratory species was prepared for consideration here to bring the resolution up to date, to simplify the resolution, which was a consolidated version of previous resolutions, and also with encouragement reflected for parties and the Secretariat to engage with the World Health Organization in developing a new instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. In recognition of the current highly pathogenic avian influenza crisis, which is set to continue, the Secretariat is proposing to again split out the avian influenza resolution to guide more specific responses to this conservation, livestock and human health threat. Therefore, in terms of the actions, the Conference of the Parties is recommended to, firstly, take note of the summary of the Migratory Species and Health Review, which is contained in Annex 1 of this document, with the full review as an information document 30.4.3. Secondly, adopt the draft amendments to Resolution 12.6 on wildlife disease and migratory species as contained in Annex 2 of this document. Thirdly, adopt the draft resolution avian influenza as contained in Annex 3 of this document. And lastly, adopt the draft decisions as contained in Annex 4 of this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, and congratulations on the work that you've done to get us to this point. And we should also thank the governments of United Kingdom and Germany for supporting this work in the intersessional period. With that, can I open the floor for any comments? Yes, Egypt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Egypt would like to thank the CMS Secretariat as well as the Scientific Council for the excellent work that have already provided to us, and we support all of the decision and draft decisions already presented. Having said that, we need to look at the emerging issues over the last few years. The issue of COVID-19. It turned out that there were many, many complications, not in terms of the disease, whatever, but how the companies played a dirty game with many, many countries in a way that not only it was costly, but we lost many, many lives. And that's why the issue of One Health approach should be considered and be implemented as already presented by CBD and World Health Organization. Now we have an action plan that can be developed, and all of us, we can benefit from them. Certainly the experience of many other countries need to be considered, especially in Egypt, when we have to face this situation for some time, and we were able to deal with this issue in a very, very successful way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Egypt, European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this very comprehensive document on wildlife disease, and we acknowledge the complex challenges posed by wildlife disease for migratory species that are presented in this document, not least when exacerbated by climate change, as we are observing in 2023 and 2024 with an extreme El Niño phenomenon. We concur with a preventive One Health approach that this is needed and that it should be prioritized to prevent, in a collaborative and transdisciplinary way, the emergence or re-emergence of zoonotic pathogens that migratory species can harbor. We support the amendments to Resolution 12.6, as well as the proposed new resolution and decisions because of the importance to minimize infectious disease risks to wildlife, while highlighting the continuous risk of avian influenza for wild bird populations, poultry, and also human health. We have some minor amendments to reflect this and also to stress the urgency of engaging with the WHO before its next assembly in May this year. And we will provide these in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I've got Israel and then Australia. Israel, please.
Thank you, Chair. The issue of the interaction of pathogens and the zoonoses has come up, of course, as was mentioned in many bodies. For example, I'm co-chair of the working group of the CITES Convention looking at zoonoses and its issues having to do with wildlife trade. Having said that, we feel the issue of pathogen spillover is got to be emphasized in the new resolution a little more. For example, in the new resolution, the operative paragraph 2 speaks about the title says parties and others, urges parties and others to minimize the risk of infectious disease to wildlife. But I think that it shouldn't just be directed to wildlife, and with some small edits, this can be reworded to engage also in pathogen spillover in terms of it going the other direction from the wildlife back to other wildlife or to livestock or to humans. I don't want to go through all the little changes we propose to do that, but we can send it in. And the same thing comes up also in a point that was mentioned by the EU just now regarding the World Health Organization treaty that's being negotiated on the issue of pandemics. And one thing we've noted is, or we've noticed, is that that treaty negotiations deal largely with having to do with prevention in developing vaccines and things like that. And I don't know if the WHO people in each party who are dealing with this are usually the health ministries, and they're not looking so much at these issues of wildlife. So when the paragraph speaks about urges the Secretariat to engage with, urges the Secretariat and parties to engage with WHO in the decisions, this is not necessarily just the party, it should be the actual CMS focal points who are aware of these issues, and we would like to have that added in, that it's not just the party to engage with WHO or with their WHO representative, it should be the CMS focal points who are aware of this. So that should be in the draft decisions also in the text, and we'll send that in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I should say we'll close this item, I think, after the Wildlife Conservation Society, where I'm very conscious of time and workshop time as well. We've got Australia first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Australia thanks the Secretariat for the preparation of this draft resolution. Wildlife disease is an important topic that affects many migratory species. So far, Australia is fortunate not to have seen any impacts relating to the current global outbreak of HPAI. Our national authorities are on alert for any incursion, and we have increased surveillance testing on our migratory birds. On the whole, the draft amendments to Resolution 12.6, Wildlife Disease and Migratory Species, are excellent, and the creation of a standalone Resolution 14AA for avian influenza is eminently sensible. In particular, Australia welcomes the reframing of the Resolution 12.6 in recognition of the global and critical need to embrace One Health and ecosystem approaches to maximise health across sectors. Australia also notes the recommendations to parties within the resolution and welcomes any further discussions in relation to progressing these in our region. Australia has identified a couple of minor additional amendments we would like to suggest to Resolution 12.6, Wildlife Disease and Migratory Species and Avian Influenza. These amendments will help improve the structure of the resolution and clarify some complex terms. We can provide these in writing to the Secretariat for incorporation.
Thank you, Australia. I've got Born Free Foundation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Born Free fully supports the CMS approach to wildlife diseases. I especially like to support the intervention by Israel on the need to influence the current negotiations under the World Health Organization of the pandemic treaty, so-called, or instrument. These comments were prepared by my colleague, Dr. Mark Jones, who is a wildlife vet, so I will read them if I may. The CMS should do all it can to promote the incorporation of a holistic and inclusive, cross-departmental and cross-sectoral One Health approach, which obviously means getting the focal points of different treaties to talk to each other, even if they're in different ministries. And the need to avoid inappropriate responses to disease emergence in the pandemic instrument being negotiated under the auspices of the World Health Organization. I think the old adage that prevention is better than cure should be our watchword here. Born Free supports the proposed amendments to Resolution 12.6 in Annex 2 of the document with the following suggested changes. Edit to suggested new preambular paragraph 12, further noting that transmission of disease from wildlife is often related to changes in human activities, and while the majority of emerging infectious diseases are believed to originate in wildlife, transmission to people often occurs via livestock and or companion animals. That's deleting a bit of text, which I'll send this to the Secretariat. A suggested additional preambular paragraph, cognizance that crowding, stress and injury among wild animals in trade provide the perfect environment for pathogens to spread and mutate, and their close proximity to people during capture, farming, transportation, butchering and trade creates many opportunities for transmission between animals and potentially to people. And there's a suggested additional preambular paragraph, further acknowledging the importance of the work on animal culture and social complexity being conducted by CMS and the relevance of this work to the health and well-being of migratory species. And then edit to the proposed operative paragraph, urges parties, paragraph 1, urges parties to recognise the links between the drivers of population decline and disease emergence and urgently enhance actions to address the drivers of migratory species population decline by, inter alia, reducing habitat loss, fragmentation and degradation, addressing climate change mitigation and adaptation, and then some additional text, identifying and mitigating the risk of pathogen emergence and spillover resulting from wild animal exploitation for trade and other purposes, and adopting a highly precautionary approach to such risks, preventing pollution, and so on as written. And a suggested edit to the proposed operative paragraph 12 urges the Secretariat and parties to engage with the World Health Organization intergovernmental negotiating body to ensure that mechanisms to prevent pathogen emergence at source and what health approaches. So that's the new suggested text. And finally, an amendment to decision 14, AA brackets B, which currently says engage with the World Health Organization in developing a new instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. And we'd like to suggest the addition of and promote the incorporation of the key elements of the operative paragraph 12 and other key elements of the operative section of resolution 12.6 into the instrument. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. If you can take these comments into the working group and send them to the Secretariat, that would be good. If I could encourage brevity in the following interventions, and if I could indulge with the interpreters for a few more minutes just to keep us working. It will only be a few minutes. So, assuming that's okay, could I go to CBD, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually the CITES Secretariat. I have a choice between CBD and Defenders of Wildlife, so I went with the CBD. The CITES Secretariat thanks the CMS Secretariat for the comprehensive document on wildlife disease. The parties to CITES adopted decisions relating to the role of CITES in reducing risk of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international wildlife trade. In terms of these decisions, the CITES Secretariat was instructed by parties to collaborate with CMS on the potential risk of pathogen spillover and identify practical solutions for reducing pathogen spillover risk from wildlife trade. The CMS Secretariat shared information on CMS activities and processes with the Secretariat, including the report on the review of migration and wildlife disease dynamics. The information received was included in the reports to the CITES Animals Committee and Standing Committee and are being considered by the intersessional working groups established by both committees, as referred to by Israel earlier. The CITES Secretariat has furthermore finalized the MOU with the World Organization on Animal Health, as well as a joint program of work focusing on activities of mutual interest, such as the safe, traceable, and legal international trade of wildlife, identifying zoonotic disease risk associated with CITES activities and CITES-listed species, and the safe and fast transport of biological samples from wild animals for diagnosis or identification. The CITES Secretariat notes with appreciation the proposed amendments to Resolution 12.6 that welcomes these collaborative efforts and that requests the CMS Secretariat to promote cooperation with CITES on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, CITES. For that, two final interventions on Wildlife Conservation Society, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the interpreters. We greatly appreciate this document and the attention of all to the issues of wildlife health, disease, and pathogen spillover. We thank the CMS Scientific Counselor for the introduction, all her work, and the interventions of the EU, Israel, Australia, Egypt, Born Free, and others. We wish to note that wildlife may not show signs of morbidity, mortality, or disease, but may carry pathogens with potential to spill over, mutate, and infect other wildlife or people, and which can lead to epidemics or pandemics. And we note that the document and draft resolution highlight the need for disease surveillance, but there's a need to also highlight pathogen surveillance. Additionally, the document notes the risk from live wildlife markets, but we encourage specific reference to large commercial urban markets for live wildlife, particularly birds and mammals for human consumption, due to the increased risks of pathogen spillover. We have a few suggestions. I've already sent them to the Secretariat. I'll highlight a couple, and those that are a little more editorial, I'll just send to the Secretariat. In preambular paragraph 12 of the proposed revision to 12.6, where it speaks about further noting the transmission of disease, etc., it seems to downplay the role of spillover from wildlife by saying the majority of infections are from livestock and companion animals. Well, that's true, but I think we learned from COVID-19 that even one spillover can be disastrous. So we suggest adding comma, nevertheless, pathogen spillover and any zoonotic infections from novel pathogens directly from wildlife poses significant risk to wildlife, livestock, and people. And again, I've sent this to the Secretariat. Operative paragraph 1 includes several actions to address the drivers of population decline and disease emergence. We recommend including preventing overexploitation and including reducing the wildlife, livestock, human interface, because those are not included and are important. We appreciate the suggestion from Israel. 2 suggestions. We just want to note in operative paragraph 12, again, where it urges the parties to engage with WHO. The parties are engaged with WHO. It's your health ministries. It's not your environment ministries. I've had many meetings with your representatives to the WHO in Geneva. So I think including their CMS focal points and party environment ministries would be extremely helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and please take these comments into the working group this evening. And then finally for today on this item, the United Kingdom, please.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks also to the COP14 Councillor for Wildlife Health and the other authors for the impressive migratory species and health report. We support the focus of a specific resolution on avian influenza, which would reflect the devastating impact this virus can have on migratory species. We also support Born Free's comments on the potential impacts of transmission between livestock and wildlife. We have a couple of proposed amendments as well. Just to pull out a couple that might be more relevant. We would propose updating the title of the resolution to wildlife health rather than wildlife disease to better reflect the current terminology used in Global One Health approaches. And we have some amendments to decision 14 CCA to clarify the role that the Secretary would have with the WHO, and we can send the full list of proposed amendments to the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, United Kingdom. Thank you very much, everyone, for your comments on that item. We will refer it to the working group, which I think is going to meet this evening on this particular issue, but Secretariat can clarify the timetable. Secretariat?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The working group on cross-cutting issues will convene tonight in we intended half an hour after the end of the plenary, so let's say like 6:40, to discuss 3 issues. The agenda item 21 on state of the world migratory species, 15.1 on evaluation of restructuring of the Secretariat, not the budgetary implications, but just the other comments which were raised, and then to have a first general, not drafting, but first general exchange on wildlife health. And then tomorrow lunchtime, the working group will meet to discuss documents 32.2 on Transfrontier conservation areas and documents 30.3.1 Ref 1 on infrastructure development and migratory species. More documents may be added to the lunch session of tomorrow depending on where we get in the morning session. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I encourage you to participate in the working group and indeed in all the working groups that you can to allow your input to be taken account of. So thank you, Secretariat, for that. With that, I'd like to ask Secretariat if there are any announcements before we close.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, just to announce there is no meeting of the Terrestrial Working Group today or tomorrow lunch. They will meet again tomorrow in the evening session. The Bureau is meeting now in the Saga room. We encourage all members of the Standing Committee, elected officers of this meeting and Chair of the Scientific Council to attend the meeting in the Saga room. Then, as usual, budget is meeting now in the Falcon, Aquatic in Pelican, Avian in Great Bastard, as explained by my colleague. Institutional and cross-cutting will be meeting in Hangul. The Secretariat has published 3 notes with agenda items assigned to the different taxa working groups, and also the timing for the agenda items assigned to the terrestrial and the avian teams. There will be side events tonight in the Expo Center and also in the Snow Leopard just here across the hall this afternoon, this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you all for input to today's discussions. I want to leave you with 3 very positive notes. 1, the technical system seems to be recovered and better and fixed. Well done, the technical team. 2, the interpreters have just given us 12 minutes of extra time. Thank you very much to them. And then the really good news is we've now approved 1 document out of about 50. So we have quite a lot still to do. Thank you all very much, and we resume here at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.